Welcome back to Fine Tuning with Drew Taylor, your one-stop shop when it comes to animation news and commentary. I'm entertainer writer Jim Hill, and Mr. Taylor, whose writings on the industry you can regularly read over on The Wrap, and whose musings on the Mission Impossible movies you can listen to on Light the Fuse, the official Mission Impossible podcast. He and I are recording this week's show on Tuesday, February 13th, 2024. And yes, I know, it's been a while since we last served up a new episode of this podcast, but there's a perfectly logical explanation, which involves a film festival, a pandemic, an elderly relative spinning in, a wake, a funeral, and then an atmospheric river, an earthquake, and a nor'easter. But let's be honest here, folks. You don't want to hear excuses. You want to hear animation news, especially the sort of news that Drew shared over on The Wrap late last week, a story that damn near broke the internet. And am I correct here? It was viewed by over 2 million people.
That was just my tweet was viewed by over 2 million people. I don't even know how many people this actually reached or how many link backs to it, but we'll get into it in the second half of the show.
That we will. All right, but first, the news. And as always, the news portion of today's show is brought to you by TouringPlans.com. If you're headed down to Orlando anytime soon to go visit some of the many theme parks you'll find there, Touring Plans can help you save time. More importantly, it can help you save money. So before you book that flight to Central Florida, go check out touringplans.com and you can thank us later. Okay, so where should we start, Drew? I mean, I guess it's important to acknowledge the stuff that just came through, and there was that trailer for the limited series Iwaju? Am I saying that right? The Disney...
That's pretty good. Yeah, that is pretty good.
Okay, all right. But again, limited series. We got our first full trailer there. Handsome looking. Though, to be honest, if we're going to talk about limited series, we do have to do the Moana story. A year ago, during his first earnings call, after Iger returned as Disney CEO. And remember, he came back to the door, replacing Bob Chapek on November 20th, 2022, and his first earnings call was February 9th, 2023. And at that time, Bob revealed that the company had a Frozen 3, a Zootopia 2, and a Toy Story 5 in the works. And then, all right, correct me if I'm wrong here, November 16th, and this was when he went on Good Morning America. That's when Bob let slip that oh, did I say Frozen 2 or Frozen 3? It's actually Frozen 3 and 4, right? But no mention of a Moana sequel. Now, mind you, what was it? Back in December of 2020, we found out that Disney Animation Studios was developing 2 limited series for Disney Plus. One that would continue the storyline of Moana, which, again, released to theaters back in November of 2016, and another limited series built around Princess Tiana, the title character from Disney's Princess and the Frog, which released originally to theaters in November of 2009. And, okay, both of these limited series were supposed to go to the Disney streaming service in 2023, but then in August of 2021, that delivery date was amended. Moana, the series, now wasn't supposed to show up on Disney Plus to 2024. And they also, at this time, they talked about the new production facility up in Vancouver, right? The one that was going to be doing long-form series for Walt Disney Animation Studios. Do you remember that?
Yes, and they are still doing Tiana up there.
Got it.
And they also provided the animation for this Moana project.
Now,
yes.
So again,
they're working.
They're working. In fact, Tiana, the series. Now, were you still hearing that is going to make the Disney Plus this fall? Because that's the weird part of it is I'm hearing that from Imagineering, and that's largely because the world and the storyline that is a large part of Tiana's Bayou Adventure gets introduced with Tiana the series. Are you hearing the same thing, or?
I had not heard that. I had heard that the look of this show is very ambitious. I don't think I can say more than that, but I hadn't heard any timelines.
Okay.
I'm sure they would love to have it coincide, but the Walt Disney World version of Tiana's Bayou Adventure was just announced to open this summer. So it's definitely not coming out this summer, the show. So I don't know what the plans are.
All right. That's interesting because, been hearing the Disneyland one is running behind schedule. But all right, that's another show. Okay, now, to further muddy the water here, April of last year, to be specific, April 3rd, 2023, Dwayne Johnson announces that Disney would be producing a live-action version of Moana, one where Johnson would not only be serving as one of the film's producers, but that in which Dwayne Johnson would be reprising his role as Maui, albeit in live-action form. And then 2 months after that, June 13, 2023, Johnson gets on social media and reveals that Disney's live-action Moana now has a release date, which is a little more than 2 years away, June 27th, 2025. But immediately after this announcement, Disney has an absolutely miserable stretch at the box office where all sorts of films, its live-action version of Little Mermaid, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, The Marvels, and Elemental, all underperform at the box office. Though, to be fair, that Peter Sohn film would eventually redeem itself ticket-wise over the length of the summer. But then, just last month, on January 29th, 2024, Nielsen reports that Disney's Moana was the most streamed movie for all of 2023 with, 1.6 billion minutes viewed. Now, just a reminder, when it comes to streaming, films and television shows, it's not how many times a complete film or a complete individual episode of a TV show is viewed, but how many minutes of a movie or a TV show are viewed. Because face it, most people, when they're streaming, are either watching on their phones or their laptops, and it's very rare that you get to complete a full film. So now, Drew, let's be realistic here. Given that information was revealed in late January of last month, this decision to change Moana the series into Moana 2, a theatrical release, that had to have been in motion before this news got out, right?
Correct. I thought I had told you about this months ago, Jim, but I guess I hadn't. Yeah, they have been thinking about this for a little while now. Basically, the episodes were coming in and they were so good. And I've heard this from other people that it's even better than the original movie.
Wow. Okay.
They were so good that they said, well, what else can we do to this? And I think it speaks to the deprioritization of Disney Plus, and also how they've proven that if a movie is in theaters, it'll do better in streaming. It'll sell more plush at Target, all of those things. Obviously, there are other Moana projects for the parks that are in various stages of development.
Okay. Yep.
It just made a lot more sense as a theatrical movie, especially with the quality of animation and the quality of the storytelling, really. So, yeah.
But, okay, now, I've been hearing some interesting things over the past couple of days. Like for example, and what this next story brings to mind is the story that you shared about John Goodman and Billy Crystal in regard to Monsters at Work. That thing was in motion and headed toward Disney Plus, and they still hadn't necessarily signed those two to do the voices for that series, right?
Correct.
I've been hearing that Dwayne Johnson had signed to do Maui for Moana the series, but now that it's Moana 2, a theatrical release, they have to renegotiate the deal. Have you heard anything to that effect? Or
I have heard conflicting reports about who was involved at what point. I think that both of them will be in it eventually, but right. I don't know if any... I've heard that Dwayne is closer because he shared it on Instagram and stuff, and he's obviously he's very involved in the remake, as you said, the live action one, which is still on tap for next year. So I don't know how that's going to work.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That
A lot of Moana, all the time, Jim.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he's definitely involved, and I think they'll get there with Ali'i soon enough. But she's been very public about not being in the live action one. So,
but interesting that she is an executive producer of the. I mean, face it, that's kind of an honorary title in a lot of situations. But speaking of which, though, Moana 2 being directed by Dave Derrick Jr., who started as a storybook artist on the original Moana.
He has a great career, though. He's done so many things.
Well, I love it when folks, get an opportunity to step up. I mean, face it. How many people we know from Chris Sanders on forward who started off boarding and, did amazing work and then got their chance to helm a project. But
here's my question about Chris Sanders. Have you ever seen an artist board in the same style that they would draw the character? I mean, you can pick a Chris Sanders board out from across the room, right?
Totally. I mean, all the way back to Lion King and Beauty and the Beast.
Yep.
I mean, it just sort of, his stuff, as always, it's like, okay, that's Chris. All right. Now back to Lin-Manuel Miranda here. Not writing any songs for the sequel. Abigail Barlow and Emily Bear are handling that aspect of the project, and evidently they came on Disney's radar because of the unofficial Bridgerton musical that I guess you can sample online and got some really great stuff. On the other hand, Mark Messina and Opeta Ofoe they're returning to handle Moana 2's score. Now, where it gets interesting, though, is Lin-Manuel Miranda is writing new songs for the live-action version of Moana. And by the way, Dwayne Johnson just yesterday revealed that they have, in fact, found the young actress who will be playing the title role in Disney's next live-action redo. But Dwayne's not ready to reveal who that is just yet. But as you meant, it's not Oli Cravalho, who voiced Moana in the original animated series we just mentioned. She's an executive producer on the live action, although I've heard she might cameo. But Olani is...
you might cameo, Jim. Anybody could cameo. Who's to say?
Well, no, that's it exactly. But she's definitely voicing Moana and Moana 2. And the final bit of news here, live action version of Moana is being directed by Thomas Kail, who directed the film versions of In the Heights and Hamilton. And, obviously, those are both musicals for the stage that were created by Lin-Manuel Miranda. And for what I've heard of friends at Disney, it was Lin who personally campaigned to get Thomas this gig, talking Kail up to executive studio as well as Dwayne Johnson. And by the way, you remember a couple of weeks back, I shared the news that Eric Goldberg was retiring, that he and Susan had bought a home in the Midwest and he'd be leaving Disney Studios. But Drew shared that Eric was staying on at Disney. Actually, he had a few things to finish up, and suddenly this makes sense, especially with Moana 2. You got to assume we're going to get some more mini Maui, right?
Yes, I think that is a fair assumption, Jim.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
So now, just to be clear here, you've heard, in fact, you mentioned earlier in the show here, live action Moana still June of 2025, right?
Yeah, it is still a big priority for the company. I mean, it was supposed to start, I think, in August of last year before the writer's strike happened. So they're very keen on getting this out the door as quickly as possible. So, yeah, I think it'll probably still stay there. But, Jim, anything's possible in this crazy town.
No, that's it exactly. I just want to share a conversation that I had earlier today about, that there's a possibility of it getting pushed out to 2026. And what's interesting is supposedly that's on the heels of the Wicked trailer that dropped in the Super Bowl, to the effect of, wow, that looks good. And remembering that, what is it? That, Wicked 2 drops, what is it, November
The following year.
the following year. And what I was hearing initially was that because of the writer's strike, Moana live action might slide out of, or initially they were thinking, all right, it's going to slide out of summer, but we could go holiday 2025. But then it's like, no, wait a minute. That's when Avatar 3 is supposed to drop. So does this mean 2026? And does it mean summer? Does it mean holiday? And part of that, to be honest, also caroms off if James Cameron is actually going to make the delivery date for Avatar 3. But
Well, I would actually keep an eye on Moana 2 versus Wicked because they have the exact same release date this year. So see who blinks. If they do stay on that date, see who triumphs. I think that will dictate a lot of the schedule for 2025.
wow, why didn't they mention that today? Okay. Oh, geez. Okay. All right. Now, Drew mentioned top of the show, Moana is very much a priority for the parks. For example, we just had Journey of Water inspired by Moana. That opened in the World Nature section of Epcot October 16th of last year. Mind you, not the first Moana-themed thing in a theme park. Moana, a homecoming celebration, actually opened at Hong Kong Disneyland back in May of 2018, less than 2 years after the film opened in theaters. Then Disneyland Park in California, their Magic Happens parade, which debuted in February 2020, that had a sizable Moana unit. November of that same year, Hong Kong Disneyland Sleeping Beauty Castle was reimagined as the Castle of Magical Dreams, and among the towers that were added to this now 177-foot tall structure was a Moana-themed tower. And now back to Disneyland.
What does a Moana-themed tower look like, Jim?
Well,
what does that look like? Is it palm fronds or something? What is it?
Do you know the rock? How in Moana everybody carries a rock to the top of the thing, only for one more. It's a seashell. Supposedly, that's what at the top of the tower. The effect of you can see the seashell for the seafarer. But anyway, back to Disneyland in Anaheim. The Main Street Electrical Parade returned to that theme park April of 2022 with its To Honor America finale retooled to feature a cameo by Moana. And of course, September of 2023, Josh D'Amaro, head of Disney Parks, Products, Experiences, teased that WDI was thinking of retheming the Dinoland USA portion of Disney's Animal Kingdom, with the idea that Chester and Hester's Dinorama would become a Moana-themed area. And the Dino Institute, home to Countdown to Extinction, Dinosaur the Ride, that would become a Zootopia themed area. However, 1 year later, September of 2023, D'Amaro offers up an amended version of this plan. Now there's an Encanto themed area going in the Chester and Hester's Dinorama, whereas an East Coast version of Indiana Jones Adventure is replacing Dinosaur the Ride. So no Moana Land for Florida.
No, I've just heard that the Animal Kingdom is a real priority, right? Is that the next? Jim is going to give us the dirt. All right.
Well, no, it's just that where this gets fascinating is that, face it, the Magic Kingdom is the most popular theme park in all of Florida. And, and here, just in the, in the weeks that Drew and I have been away from doing fine tuning, we had that 7-minute long tease for Epic Universe drop. And, face it, Disney, that's Disney's priority. How do we react to that? And, the notion is, look, if we pour, billions into Animal Kingdom, it's still going to be Animal Kingdom. Whereas, on the other hand, if we pour billions into the Magic Kingdom and expand the overall capacity of that park by adding 3 mini lands, for, another 10 or 15,000 people a day, that's a much smarter return on investment. So, I know this is probably disappointing news for the folks at Animal Kingdom who have been patiently waiting their turn. But I would anticipate, especially with the D23 Expo coming up in, August of this year, you're probably going to hear more about an expansion of the Magic Kingdom than you are about a transformation of the Dino Land section at Animal Kingdom. I mean, it will eventually happen, but this is more about a Disney looking at an epic universe, and it's like, the only thing that makes sense in this situation is to make the Magic Kingdom the most, which is already the most popular theme park in Florida, bigger, to handle more capacity, because, with the notion of that gives you, a reason for people to return to the Magic Kingdom. So anyway, all right. So where were we here? Okay. Made another visit to Target this week, and was strolling through the toy aisle, and was looking at the Wish display, which has been marked down yet again. Everything's now an additional 15% off, and Wish, of course, has become available for purchase on digital platforms like Prime Video, iTunes, and Vudu 3 weeks ago on June 23rd. And look, the folks at Walt Disney Animation Studio obviously have to be disappointed that both Wish and Once Upon a Studio didn't receive Academy Award nominations, both in the Best Animated Feature Character and the Best Animated Short. It's also got to be tough that film's songs by Julia Michaels and Benjamin Rice. Also, its score by Dave Metzger didn't get recognized by the Academy either. Just feels a little personal this year. Anyway, our Best Animated Feature nominees, surprise, surprise, the Boy and the Heron. I have to admit, I'm happy to see Elemental in there for our buddy Peter, but at the same time, Moana. And by the way, are we enjoying our 500-page art book?
Yes, I love it. I was gloating to somebody else the other day that I had it. So, yeah. Making friends all around.
As you should, Drew. As you should. Okay, finishing out, we have Robot Dreams and, of course, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. For animated short, we've got Letter to a Pig, 95 cents is our uniform, and Pachydermy.
And War is Over. I've seen War is Over, which is really great. It's Dave Mullins' new short, who worked at Pixar.
Yeah.
And it is really, really wonderful. Okay. Yeah, I loved it. The incorporation of the John and Yoko song is a little odd, but it's really very cool. It's about soldiers on different sides of a kind of alternate history, World War I, who are playing chess and using the bird to send their moves over to one another. It's really, it's as heartwarming as I can see Jim looking very intrigued.
That sounds charming. I will have to seek that out.
What did you think of the Best Picture nominations? I mean, were you surprised by anything?
Look, a boy in fact, it's worth noting that this coming weekend, Saturday, February 17th, the Annies are being held at UCLA's Royce Hall. And it's kind of a foregone conclusion at this point that Boy and the Boy and the Heron is going to take home the Oscar for this year's Best Animated Feature. But it'll be interesting to see who else gets some love coming out of the Annies this Saturday. But yeah, I mean, I was pleased, given the narrative that was initially out there for Elemental, that it got this love. But on the other hand, there's a part of me that really, really, really wants Nimona to take it, just so the folks at Blue Sky, again, that story didn't end well, but it would be lovely if the very last thing that they got to touch, that they worked so hard on and got completed elsewhere, got some recognition. Well, what about you? What surprised you?
Yeah, I mean, I love Robot Dreams. I think it's really awesome. It's not coming out until May. I'm sorry to everyone.
Okay.
But it is beautiful and brilliant, and I loved it, so I was happy to see it. But I was a little disappointed that Turtles didn't make the top 5. I love that movie so much. Jim alluded to me contracting COVID once again, and the first thing I did when I was laying in bed was fire that up, because it's just such a warm, fun, beautifully animated movie. But yeah, I mean, this year was just, I thought, full of amazing animation.
And let's be honest here, February of 2024 is off to a strong start. I mean, have you seen Orion in the Dark yet?
Yeah, it's wonderful. Have you watched it yet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's one of these things where it's like, and again, the fact that it's over at Netflix and they have been as supportive as that they can be of their stuff. I felt bad that it's February, it's early in the year, and come award season for 2024, I don't know if this will get remembered, but it's well written, it's beautifully animated, great fun. Go seek it out. But yeah, now looking ahead to the rest of 2024, we just got a trailer for Despicable Me 4, which won't arrive in theaters till July 3rd of this year, but we have our Gru Jr. And now, mind you, this is the teaser trailer. I'm hearing that we'll get a second fuller trailer in front of Kung Fu Panda 4, which arrives in theaters early next month, March 8th. On the other hand, if we're talking about theatrically released films, I gotta say, Drew, I am genuinely disappointed by what's been going on with those Pixar films that were returned to theater or made their theatrical debut. Soul on January 12th, for Turning Red just last weekend, February 9th. And I really have some trepidation about what's going to happen with Luca on March 8th, because what is it? Turning Red just this past weekend only made 637,000 in North America, which sounds bad, but when you compare that to the 557,000 that Soul made over the 4-day long Martin Luther King Day weekend, I was hoping people would come out to support these Pixar films, see them up on the big screen, and it kind of hurts that didn't happen. And but to be fair,
there was no marketing behind it, Jim. To be fair, I mean, the fact that you and I even knew that these things were happening is a miracle, because they were just not very well marketed. But seeing them on the big screen is so much fun, and I encourage people who still have that option to go see it.
And at the very least, Luca, just come on, you got to see that on a big screen. And more to the point, we have to be fair. These 3 films at least got a theatrical release. Coyote versus Acme, on the other hand, we'll tell you what, Mr. Taylor will reveal more about this movie and what's going on the second half of today's show. But first, this. And we're back. Before we get started on the sad story of Coyote versus Acme, which I hope will have a happy ending, thanks to Drew's article over on the Wrap, but more on that in a sec. Anyway, we were talking a moment ago about The Boy and the Heron, which once upon a time was supposed to be Hayao Miyazaki's last movie. And we were also just talking about theme parks with all the Moana stuff, and want to talk up Ghibli Park, which opened in Japan back in November of 2022. It's expanding, Drew. This 17.5 acre park is adding a new land, the Valley of the Witches, which opens next month on March 16th and features, a stationary version of Howl's Moving Castle, not to mention a recreation of the bakery from Kiki's Delivery Service, and then the House of the Witches from Earwig and the Witch. I really, really, really want to get over to Aichi Park in Japan at some point to see Ghibli Park in person with my daughter Alice. Now, mind you, not to be blunt here, folks, it sounds like I have a better chance of doing that someday than it does ever getting the chance to see Coyote versus Acme. Now, a little background before Drew gets started here. Coyote versus Acme started out as an Ian Fraser story that was published in The New Yorker back in 1990. And, had a wonderful premise of, the notion of Wile E. Coyote taking the Acme Corporation to court because of all of the devices that they sold him when he's trying to pursue the Roadrunner would fail. And Warner Brothers thought it was a wonderful idea as well. They optioned the film rights, and the project promptly entered development hell. It took decades before a workable script that actually delivered on the premise finally was pulled together. That emerged in 2018. Dave Green got hired to direct this in 2019. John Tiana joined as the human lead of the story in February of 2022. Production begins in New Mexico the following month, March of 2022, and wraps in May of that same year. Now, mind you, in the middle of that, April of 2022, Warner Brothers Entertainment merges with Discovery Inc. And David Zaslav, the CEO of Discovery Inc., becomes the new CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery, the merged company, which is saddled with, $55 billion worth of combined debt. And that's supposedly Zaslav's priority. He's got to deal with the debt for the company. So back in August of 2022, this is when Warner's announces that they're taking a write-down on Batgirl and Scoob Holiday Haunts, right?
Yep.
With the notion that, and what was interesting, in August of that same year, Zaslav on an earnings call said, to justify what they were about to do with these two completed, Batgirl was basically completed. Holiday Haunts had some work that had to be done. But Zaslav said, look, we're not going to launch a movie until it's ready. And we're not going to put a movie out unless we believe in it. And then later that same year in November, at a Deal Book event, he had taken a lot of heat in the trades and among other folks in the industry for what he did for Batgirl and Scoob Holiday Haunts. And he said, look, we made a strategic decision. It was difficult. It was painful, but I think it was the right decision for the company, and it was necessary. Which brings us now, Drew, to November of 2023. Now, at this point, Coyote versus Acme it's completed, right? And it's done a couple of test screenings that's actually done quite well.
Yeah, I mean, there was it's finished. It played. Okay. When the news first came out, there was one more screening. Yeah.
Okay. So, talk us through, because again, you wrote this amazing story for the Wrap about this, which when it came out, was published, kind of exploded. It's fascinating to watch the number of folks who, had previously gotten upset about what happened with Batgirl and with Scoob Holiday Haunts. And this kind of moved it to a whole new level because those test screenings, Coyote versus Acme came away with good scores, and people were actually talking about, we finally have a movie that really is in the spirit of the Looney Tunes shorts, right? And delivers.
Yeah, and the 2D animation for the fans out there was done by Duncan Studios, Jim, in Pasadena, who we know and love. They did the animated sequence in Mary Poppins Returns, great 2D animation, and in fact there were some in-house animation too at at Warner Brothers, which is, when was the last time you heard somebody pick up a pencil inside Warner Brothers, Jim? I mean, it's unbelievable. But yeah, I mean, there were a lot of things in this article that nobody knew about, including the fact that there were a number of suitors for the project that were pretty, they were good. They were good numbers, but Warner Brothers was not happy and also did not allow them to counter.
That's the thing I find fascinating about this story, that in a normal negotiation, again, it's a negotiation, that you have a number you want. Somebody makes an offer. You counter. They counter. You eventually get there. And the fact that it was a vacuum. It's just that they would, Netflix made an offer, and Paramount did I?
Yeah, Paramount's offer had a theatrical component as well. So that is really crushing. As that a streaming deal would have been great. Any deal would have been great, but to have it in theaters would have been really special.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, what's fascinating is, look, clearly, given the fact that Zaslav, several times, whether it was the earnings call or the deal book event, what they had done was controversial enough, with Batgirl and Scoob Holiday Haunt, that Zaslav felt that he had to talk about it publicly. And the fact that here it is, it's happening all over again. And what's worse is, again, at least with Batgirl, and he could say, well, look, it wasn't ready, and talked about how, what is it, we're not going to put it on a movie just to get a good quarter. But, here we are revisiting the exact same situation. And the other thing, I think the thing that strikes me the funniest about all this is, look, you've seen Looney Tunes back in action, right? From November.
Of course.
Okay, so live action by Joe Dante and animation by Eric Goldberg. But do you remember the scene in the boardroom where they have the actual Warner Brothers played by those twins, Dawn and Dan Stanton? But they have the other people seated at the table with the titles of what they're the VP of in front of them. You have the vice president in charge of bad ideas. You have the vice president of never learning, and and the vice president of stating the obvious. And again, to state the obvious, what would it take to put to make a deal and put this out into the world? And the very notion that, how much are they going to write off for this thing? It's a $30 million write down is what I've heard.
It's like 30. Yeah, between 30 and 40 million. So I would say, if these people came in with more than 40 million, that they should have just taken it. But the thing we have to remember that was another thing that I could not believe reporting this, was that Zaslav and his lieutenants never actually watched the movie.
And that, what does that say to the creatives in town?
Yeah.
Just the fact that who would want to go work at a studio where, again, you make a movie that tests well. You make a movie that ties into that studio's heritage, that puts an IP out that they own, that they market, in a good light. And and the people in charge of the studio won't even watch it. And more to the point, they're making a decision about what to do with that film without even it's 90 minutes long, right?
Probably, yeah.
Now, what was kind of interesting is that, of course, Drew writes his story, and then everybody else in town comments on it. And I want to say it's 48 hours later that a Deadline finally weighs in. But I have to admit, Deadline did have that one quote from Phil Lord that I thought was kind of interesting, because Phil has actually seen the movie. And
yes, but Phil, they had a tweet from Phil. It wasn't like they talked to Phil.
There we go.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah.
But Phil tweeted out how funny it would be for all of this. Again, the controversy about effectively deleting, Coyote versus Acme for a tax credit. So how interesting this would be for this to end with a congressional hearing. Because that was the other part, I think, of the story, that there were people talking in Washington back when Batgirl and Scoob holiday haunts, the notion of writing them off and throwing them in the vault, to the effect of this seems bordering on illegal,
Yeah.
And so are you continuing to follow the story? Have there been any development?
Well, yeah, I mean, I heard today that there were a bunch of people protesting outside of the studio, which is very cool to me.
Okay.
But, I still think that the movie is probably doomed, but I think that I made it harder for him to just delete it and not say anything. The earnings call is in 10 days. I hope and pray if someone is listening that is a major stockholder, ask him what is going on, because I know that Warner Brothers has been bad-mouthing me to people, but they have never said that anything in my article was actually incorrect. So I am just desperate to know what they're going to do and how they're going to play this, because you're right. It really riled people up, the story.
Totally. And again, but there is a ticking clock. Isn't there? When does
they thought that it would be gone before this call in 10 days? But
okay,
yeah, I mean, I don't. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Okay, but forgive me for making this transition. At this point, is it a mission impossible to save this thing, or could?
Yeah, but I think we could still do it. I think I don't know. I have this weird sense of optimism that if we are loud enough and, but yeah.
Now,
you're right, Jim. It is.
All right. Just one quick thing before we close here, that the number, I think you shared it in the article, that what Warner Brothers Discovery had decided was their overall cost here between the production costs and that sort of thing. They were looking for $70 million?
70 to 80. And I had heard that they were also kind of artificially inflating that number to include fees that really shouldn't have been there. But,
okay.
All
right.
Who knows? Yeah.
And, do you think it's possible one of the streaming services at this point? I mean, if you think about...
Well, I mean, I'm sure that experience was horrible for them if they were throwing out major numbers and not getting any kind of, response. Somebody, IndieWire today said there were 10 studios in the mix, which I don't even know if there are 10 studios in town. I don't know if Hallmark Channel was involved or Tubi or, I don't know, Roku was involved. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You're right. If somebody told me there were 10 studios in town, I would struggle to get off of the fingers of one hand at this point.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, speaking of Mission Impossible, seriously, folks, if you are not listening to Light the Fuse, the official Mission Impossible podcast, which Drew does with the very talented Charles Hood, you are missing out on so many great. Not just, I mean, don't get me wrong. The 7 Mission Impossible films are terrific. And by the way, according to the ad that ran during the Super Bowl, they're now all streaming on Paramount Plus, right?
Yeah, that was a cool ad. I thought that was neat. I thought the longer version.
Yeah, I thought that was a cool ad too. But what are you, or better yet, who are you and Charles talking with on this week's episode?
Well, I'm not sure who this week is. We're going back in the catalog and kind of re-releasing the earlier episodes that were part of the show before we were the official Mission Impossible podcast. So we're hoping to give people kind of a glimpse at the early days and also some of our very best episodes. So we're continuing to roll those out right now. So it's kind of a fun treat to go back,
cool,
and
cool.
Listen to those. Yeah.
All right. While we're talking about our various projects. I want to remind you that Len and my newest project, the Disney Unpacked show, our first ever video series, which we're doing in collaboration with veteran imaginator Jim Schul. This month, February, we've been doing shows about Mickey's Toontown. Next month, however, we're going to be doing the history of rock and roller coasters starring Aerosmith. So, fun shows. Jim shares amazing behind the scenes photos. You want to head over to Patreon and check that out. Let's see. Also want to remind you the other podcast we have here. I just mentioned Mr. Testo, who I, of course, do Disney Dish with. We also have Epic Universal Podcast, which I do with Eric Hersey. Just earlier today, did a recording of we're reviving our merch show. I want that too, and I'm doing that with Eric's lovely bride, Lauren Hersey. And later this week, I will also be recording a brand new Looking at Lucasfilm with Brian Gahn. And God help me, I'm going to get Marvelous Disney back up out of the ground as well. Anyway, let's see what else. If you folks could do Drew and I a favor, if you could head over to Apple Podcast and rate and review, well, not just the show you're listening to right now, find Tooning, but also Light the Fuse, the official Mission Impossible podcast. That would be helpful. Let's see. Also need to mention social media. And again, I know you were on Twitter because we had 2 million people look at your tweet for in regard to Coyote versus Acme. Where else are you these days?
Well, I am everywhere with the Drew Tailored handle, Drew Tailored like a tailored shirt. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I'm mostly active on Twitter, even though it sucks so bad. But yeah, follow me wherever your heart desires.
Okay. In my case, I'm still on X, Twitter as well. Likewise, Instagram is Jim Hill Media, and over on Facebook is Jim Hill Media News. And I guess that's going to do it for this week, folks. But here's a promise. We're coming back next week, and we're coming back the week after that. I, again, apologize for the blanks in the schedule there. We were overtaken by events, but we're back in the saddle now, and Drew and I will be back with more fine-tunings soon. So till then, thanks for listening, and come on back next week, okay?